So I'm Renata Forsti, and I am the director of the Kennedy Center. So I welcome you to this panel discussion. And I have a few announcements first. Just make you aware. So today we have trunk or treat downstairs in 101, and they're handing out international candy. So when you're finished here, you might want to go downstairs. Just go to the far end of the other hall and go downstairs to 101. And then I was told to tell you that if you are participating in our bucket list challenge this semester, visit 101 to submit your entry. And that if you are participating, you would know what that means. So just 101, that's where the candy is, and that's where the bucket list is. Also, next week, we have our book of the semester. It will be our lecture, and it will be by Professor Paul Reeve from the University of Utah. And his book is this, that he'll be talking about Religion of a Different Color, Race and Mormon Struggle for Whiteness. We have a few more copies left of the book, so if you would like it and, skim through it, see what you can read between now and next week. It's really good, very interesting, very dense. But I would encourage you, if you're interested, let me know. I have a few copies. And then the other is that we have our Kennedy Research Fellows competition that is going on. And this is, each semester we have a different theme. So this semester is social justice. Next semester is women in politics. So if you have a paper that you're working on for a class and you would like to submit it, polish it up, and the submission date is the 16th of November to be considered as a Kennedy Research Fellow. And you're awarded a $1,000 fellowship and able to present your paper at our last conference this semester. So those of you who are working on papers, I'd encourage you to think about that. So we are very excited to have our panel today. It's being moderated by Professor Valerie Hegstrom, who is the coordinator for Global Women's Studies. And if you have not visited the Global Women's Studies office, you should. It's down the hall. And then you can go down and get candy in 101. And I will let our panelists, who are from Women of Color, introduce themselves. Oh, and then if we do have question and answer time, please come over to this mic because we record this, and that way people can hear your questions.
So the presidency of the Global Women's Studies, sorry you guys, of the Women of Color Club have done me the great honor of asking me to introduce them. So we're going to start with Losa, who's down at the end of the table. Wave, Losa, good. Losa is a senior majoring in sociology with a minor in communications. She grew up in the green rolling hills of Austin, Texas, and can't wait to be back there. She's constantly curious, always endeavoring to be more conscientious, and aspires to be a connector of people and their ideas. She's married to her favorite human being, who is Aaron. Together, they are a pleasant surprise to people around Utah County who apparently have never seen an interracial couple before, which is odd. When she grows up, she hopes to have traveled to every continent and, to quote Losa Smith, visited every clime, swept every country, and let her love for God and life sound in every ear. Losa believes in open dialogue motivated by love and a desire to listen, not just hear. And she's fortunate enough to serve the women of color on campus as they come to understand that not only is this their university too, but these beautiful women are entitled to all the Father hath as well. Okay, Déborah Aléxis. So Déborah was born in the U.S. and raised in Haiti until halfway through her 5th grade year. Her move to the U.S. sparked her interest in the etiology of race in America and her passion to eradicate racism. She has served as a secretary and first counselor for the Relief Society and activities supervisor for the Black Student Union, and was a member of the BYU Women's Choir. She's studying sociology with a French minor and Africana Studies minor. She's the vice president of the Women of Color Club and the communications director of Girls Lobby, a nonprofit she and her friends created that teaches high school girls how to get involved in politics. Their motto is "Take Power, Give Back." She enjoys singing, reading, writing, exercising, and sharing memes with people in her free time. Delirio Juarez is a senior psychology major and a global women's studies minor. She is Mexican-American and was born and raised in southern Idaho. Delirio's passion for helping others has led her to seek opportunities to help vulnerable populations. Along with doing school right now, she currently works part-time at a preschool for children with autism, and she dressed up as a bunny rabbit for them today. That's not in this introduction. On campus, Delirio is involved with clubs such as Conexiones, a service opportunity through YServe to help Hispanic families with English and homework, the Women's Studies Honor Society, and the Women's Studies Journal, which is called A Woman's Experience, and she's also the secretary for the Women of Color Club. Delirio also does research on campus for Dr. Louise Wheeler and is currently doing a qualitative study on women of color on campus. She's an avid feminist, a lover of books and music, and an advocate for change. Kristalynn Appiah is a junior in the psychology program and a business management minor. Krystalynn's beautiful ethnic blend comes from her mother, who is from Farmington, Utah, and her father, who is from Ghana, West Africa. Kristalynn knows that everyone has a story, and her love of understanding others led her to the psychology major. In addition to working part-time and being a full-time student, Kristalynn is a research assistant for Dr. Louise Wheeler. Her research centers around the varied and sometimes painful experiences of women of color on BYU campus. As a dedicated member of the Deborah Bonner Gospel Unity Choir, Kristalynn cherishes every opportunity she is given to reach out to people through song. Kristalynn's extensive international travel as a child instilled within her a love for learning abroad and from both people and experiences. She hopes to live abroad one day. She says, this is her, if she can ever learn a new language. So I have total faith in you, Kristalynn. I know you can do that. Kristalynn is a passionate feminist, social justice advocate, and places the utmost importance on staying informed. She seeks to help others not just learn about the importance of justice and inequality, but experience it through action. So welcome to all of them. So these leaders have created a list of questions for me to read to them, and then they are just going to have a discussion amongst themselves that you get to eavesdrop on, and then maybe they'll decide to leave time for questions. So the first question is, what was it like for you when you first arrived on campus, and how was it different than your expectations?
Can you hear me? Do I have to grab it at all? Yeah? Okay. Oh, well, hello, everybody. Okay, so, geez, I started at BYU in 2012. That's a long time ago, y'all. But I started in the summer of 2012, so for me, the campus is much smaller. So hands up if you've come summer term. Hey, small campus, ooh. So it was very small, and oftentimes it's the sporting teams who are here, the football team is here. And so I felt like when I initially got to campus, I did see a lot of people who were brown or black, and that was nice. And then fall semester came around, and whoa, have I never been in a place with so many white people in my entire mortal existence. It was scary. It was scary. And it was a little bit unsettling because I'd never been more brown than when I came to BYU.
My experience is kind of the same. I came right after I graduated high school. I come from South Florida, and so that area is pretty diverse. And so coming up here during summer term, and my only experience with BYU prior to that was with SOAR, which is a summer of academic refinement. And my friends joke around, and it's kind of basically like BYU's Brown Camp. And, obviously that's not what it's called, but yeah. But there were a lot more brown people. And so when I came here, I was just oh, okay. Yeah, I'm the only person of color around for miles, and my mother noticed that too. She dropped me off, and when she was at the airport on the way back, she was like, "Deborah, please be careful. When you were going around campus buying your books and stuff, I went to the store with your little brother, and we were walking around, and I've never been stared at so much in my life. I've never felt so different." And so I'm really worried about you. And so she said to just be careful when you're out there, because if people look at me like that, without without even realizing that they're looking at a human, just the way that they were staring at her, she's like, their only experience with people of color or ideas of people of color probably come from the media, and we know how we're portrayed in the media, so be careful. And so that was like our conversation, and it's been troubling. I found quite a few ignorant groups of people, but I've also found really good people that are really engaged and interested in my experience and see me for me. They don't approach me because of my brownness. They approach me because they want to get to know me. So, yeah. Oh, here.
So being from southern Idaho, that is Idaho, predominantly white place as well. But where I live, there are a lot of Hispanics. And so coming to BYU, I was like, oh yeah, like I'll still be a bunch of white people, like, yeah, it'll be okay. But I didn't realize like how much I'd miss of my culture. I couldn't just go to the panaderia, little bakery store right down the street, or the meat place with my mom, where everyone's speaking Spanish. So that was something I didn't realize that I'd miss coming to BYU, is not having anyone who understood my culture, or even different things about it.
And for me, I have lived in Utah for 10 years, and I went to high school in Bountiful, which everyone calls the bubble. So it's like Provo area is a bubble, and then Bountiful is like a separate bubble. So 2 bubbles. And so moving down here from Bountiful was a little bit different because like the percentage of white students was a lot higher than at my high school, but it was about the same. So it wasn't crazy different when I first arrived, but it's changed a little bit as I've been here. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is about code switching. So you probably need to explain what code switching means here. So do you code switch depending on where you're at while you're here at BYU?
Yeah, so code switching is basically, I think a lot of people of color have had to learn how to do this, and W.E.B. Du Bois talks about this too, this idea of double consciousness and constantly being able to switch lanes depending on where you are. And so I've noticed that my speech pattern, my mannerisms, I've tried to tame them or rein them in more in like white environments or racially like unaware environments, and I'm a little bit more myself, and I get to be my full self in other contexts, like with my friends and people of color that really get me and understand me. And so code switching is like switching lanes. I don't know if that's making sense. Yeah. Do you want to go? Yeah. Want to go?
Okay, I'll go. Okay, so my mother's from Tonga and my dad's from Palau. I'd show you on the map, but it's so small. I'm not sure anyone would be able to see either of those islands. But I grew up in Austin, Texas, like Dr. Hegstrom said in my introduction. And so lots of times when my hair was straight, people thought that I was a very tall Latina girl. And when my hair was curly, they thought I was half black, half white, or half black, half Hispanic. So growing up, it was like I didn't really have a code because I didn't grow up around Polynesian people. And then coming to BYU, there are lots of Polynesians here with like the migration of people to Yosepa, and lots of Polynesians just hanging around, staying here in the valley. And so for me, I felt like I had to learn a Polynesian code that I did not learn as a child, because that's the code that was the only code acceptable for me to have around white people. Because they saw me, and I mean, clearly you look at me and you're like, oh, I bet you're Polynesian. Are you someone? And like, no, I'm not. Thank you for asking. And so I had to learn this Polynesian code. And so when I introduce myself, I say my name is Losa. But if I'm in a Polynesian community, because I'm part of the Provo, Utah, Wasatch, Tongan Stake, I say, hi, my name is Losa, because that's how you say my name. It's Losa. It's not Losa. So I've had to learn those two different things. And it's hard to learn a code when it wasn't taught to you as a child, because you find yourself stumbling a lot. And I am in this weird limbo space, kind of maybe like with all the like suicide lanes here. I kind of exist there sometimes in Utah because I'm not Tongan enough, I'm not Polynesian enough, but I sure as heck am not white. And so the code switching has become, it's very tiring. So if I ever look a little tired, that's why.
So I wanted to talk about my experience with this a little bit. So for me, growing up in South Florida, in my town, it's called Wellington, and we're the winter equestrian capital of the U.S., so it's pretty bougie. And there are like, I would say there would be about like, there's about like two sides of town. It's not like clearly divided, but there are literally houses that are worth 1.5 million and like within like 2-mile radius, and then there are houses that are worth like, I don't know, like 200,000 or 100,000. Anyways, and it's been a weird experience having to navigate those two spaces growing up because, again, and our school was a pretty good school, and I've always been like really studious, and I loved reading and being involved in books. And so the way that I learned how to talk, and my family is immigrated from Haiti, and so coming here as a Black immigrant, I've had to learn. It was imposed on me that I was Black, and coming from a pretty predominantly Black country, that was foreign to me, and I didn't understand it. But being here in the U.S., I was like, oh, Black has a negative connotation here. It's not a good thing to be Black in America. And a lot of things came to that, you know, as I grew up. My mom, she wasn't really well versed in talking about race because that idea is foreign to her. It was more about like class. But as she went on through the system, she realized that she was running into a lot of obstacles because of how she looked and because of how she sounded. And so for her, she wanted to shield me by telling me that I was different than African Americans. And now my mom is, we have a tough relationship, but I know that my mom is not like, she's not one to just make judgments on people. But I found my mom making judgments and saying stuff like, you know, you're different than African Americans. You have to be different because it's really hard to be an African American, and you don't want to ever be labeled as that. So don't hang out with this group of people. Don't do that. And so she tried to shelter me in that way. And it wasn't, she didn't try to make me like hang out with white people because she's like, white people are also a little bit weird, so don't, I don't want you spending too much time with them. But so she just kept me sheltered all the time. And so I watched TV, and again, TV is mostly like white culture, and that's mostly what you saw. And so I learned how to, like, my mannerisms were like not what someone would stereotypically say is Black. And so a lot of times when I would be with my white friends, they'd say comments like, and this is something I've also noticed here at BYU, this is ongoing. They're like, oh, you know, you're not like really Black. You're like an Oreo. And, you know, a lot of people can relate going to that. And I've heard it for brown people too. You're a coconut. And to say that inside, like, you are a white person, but out, you don't show it on the outside. And, or people would be like, oh, you're like a good Black person. You're not the other kind. So I was always made like the exception in a lot of spaces. And for a while, I thought I had made it because I was like, oh, maybe people are, you know, I'm not being labeled as African American. I'm an Oreo. Maybe I can finally make it in. But I was running into obstacles where, you know, my teachers didn't believe that my work was mine because it was too eloquent or it was too this. And over time, you know, and I learned this in race and ethnicity too, that after a while, people don't even see you as Haitian. People don't even really see you as Haitian Americans. My accent faded pretty quickly. And so I was just another Black person for a lot of people. And I noticed that especially when I was applying to BYU and I was getting in, people that had grown up within my ward were now telling me, oh, you only got in because you're black. And I was like, whoa, what happened to I'm the Oreo or I'm different? And so that title, I realized that the acceptance card that like white people were giving out could also be quickly taken away. And so that I was always walking on this tightrope, you know, and I always had to learn how to code switch when was the right time to like use slang and relax, and when was the time to be prim and proper. And so that has always been a confusing experience for me. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm playing a role, and I'm always on set, and I can never get off. And I feel like a lot of black and brown people feel like that.
So what stereotypes have you encountered here on campus?
You want to start?
I think, so being Mexican American, I get that I love spicy food, and I do not. I don't. Like, I'm sorry, it just doesn't vibe with me. Or that I love to dance, and my roommates might roll their eyes hearing that I don't love to dance. I'm sorry, it's just not my thing. And I've also encountered just around me, like, how loud and crazy Latinas are. It's like, you want crazy, say that comment to me again. Yeah, I think those are mainly the things that I've encountered.
I have one. So I'm not on a sports team, but I'm not surprised. But my sister was, and so like I wasn't super surprised when people asked me like if I was on the track team, because she was, and we look very similar. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you're confusing me for my sister. That makes sense because we're related and we look very similar. But I was just out one day and this guy came up to me and he's like, hey, you're on the soccer team, right? And I was like, no. And there's that girl on the soccer team. I don't know her. I've never met her. We look very different. She's much shorter than I am. And I was like, no, I'm not on the soccer team, sorry. And he's like, oh, never mind. I'm so sorry. And he like left and I was like, wrong person, but good try. So just like sports, that's a big one.
Yeah, I think definitely sports. Lots of people ask like, oh, Losa, are you like here on like sports scholarship? Like, no, dude, I'm way too short for the volleyball team. Have you stood next to those girls? It ain't me. It ain't me. So yeah, I've gotten that a lot. And I think, I mean, again, with there being so many Polynesians here, I'll get return missionaries who recognize that I'm Tongan and I've served in Tonga, and they go up to me like, oh, sis, I'm like, okay, pump the brakes, because first of all, I speak English and English only, okay? Because when my parents came to America, they felt the pressure of making sure that their children born in America were not just fluent, but extremely fluent, extremely articulate, so no one could question our intelligence. So no, I do not speak Tongan. And the hard part about that is Polynesians, they're so nice, they're funny, they're easygoing. And so when I respond with just the least bit of sharpness to that assumption, somehow I am like the worst Polynesian they've ever met. And that to me is such an insult, because first of all, I'm sorry, have you met every single Polynesian on the planet? You haven't? Oh my goodness, I couldn't tell, and so that stereotype of me being like super Tongan, I hate that. Because then I'll get Polynesians as well. I'm like, man, sis, you're so skinny. Your mom feeds you? And I'm like, okay, just because I'm not much larger than I am right now doesn't mean I'm not Tongan enough. And so I think it's interesting because not only is there like this white expectation that I have a tauvala and I wear a kahoa to church every Sunday, and just there's that expectation that I'm that level of Tongan from white people, but then from Polynesian people it's like, oh, you don't speak Tongan? Oh, so you're a plastic Tongan because you grew up in America. It's like, wow, that's not nice. So those are stereotypes I've run into.
And to add to that, I think that it's something that's happened to like, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I've noticed that this, like with like black and brown people that I've grown around in like white areas, in order to kind of like, they're pushed on the margins, and in order to like create a community, they have to they then try to create in groups and out groups, and so they have to define themselves as a certain thing. And so then when other people come, like, and if they fit that definition, then they're in that group, but if not, then there's an out group. And so I think that's where that comes from. It's like, yeah, I get the same thing too. They're like, from certain Black people, at least like growing up, they were like, oh, you're not Black enough, you're not this enough. But I'm like, oh, but when I turn this assignment and I have to make sure that it's like, I don't know, that I made sure that I cite everything and go back and make sure that I do the best work that I can every time, and I always have to prove myself in that way, and so it kind of, I definitely relate with that. It's the you're not enough for both groups, and so then you're just left as like feeling like you have no man's land, like where do I belong and who do I go to? And so it's been, I just really connected with that comment.
So does living in a predominantly white LDS community affect your worship? And if so, how?
Yes. I think it does, because with the history of the church and the things that we've had happen, a lot of people come up with their own logic for things that we can't explain. And a lot of times the logic they come up with is hurtful, and they don't realize that. And so they're just, oh yeah, like this is why we had this. Meanwhile, I'm there in the classroom just like awkward, like I don't know what to do, because whether they realize it or not, their comments are hurting to me and to my identity. So I don't remember what else the question was. That was it?
Yeah.
I can go. So the upside of having so many Polynesians here is that we have a Tongan steak, which is awesome. But that presented an interesting problem for me my freshman year, because there was an option to go to the ward of like the apartment that I lived in Heritage, back when it was called New Heritage. Anyways, so there's an option to like go to that ward or to go to the YSA 220 or 221. And it was weird because like I loved my roommates. Like, ooh, the Lord sent me my roommates, y'all. Because here's how I know. Side note, my roommate, guess what? She's half Mexican, half white. And so she understood so many things, and we could just exist around each other. And that was powerful for me. So I went to my freshman ward, but sometimes, like Deli said, whenever there were comments made about like, oh yeah, missionaries are so awesome because we go to these places and we just save people. You know what I mean? They have like nothing and we just save them. We take them out and it's like, oh my goodness, your name is not Jesus. Calm down. Do you know what I mean though? And then there's just like white savior complex, and it's like, okay, y'all, let's just be real honest for a second. Point on that map where the savior is from, because I bet he looked more like me. Do you know what I mean? And so it was like a little bit frustrating to like be in my freshman ward and have the focus be so much on like how the savior presented versus what the savior did. And that was so difficult for me. And so whenever I got like a little too much of that, I just went to my YSA 220 ward. And it was nice to be able to worship and to sing songs in Tongan, because although I don't speak the language, there's something so innate about the power that comes from singing in Tongan for me that I know that is from God and not from anyone else.
Yeah, it definitely affects my worship in the sense of like I always feel different in my approach. So I've kind of hopped religions around, and I've kind of switched around religions a lot. And so I grew up Protestant, and then I went and became Catholic. That's actually a funny story. And then my mom, you know, when we moved here, she went back to the Mormon church. And so I decided to, I decided to join also. And I really felt different because, with the Protestant background, and I say Protestant because I don't know exactly which faction it would fit into, because this was in Haiti, where people, when they would pray, it would be like an enchantment. They'd walk around, and that connection and that conversation with Christ always seemed so personal, and everyone would have it in a room. So people are walking around and they're swaying their hands, their eyes are closed, and they're speaking to God, and they're pouring their hearts out, and it is powerful, and it's enchanting to watch. And so seeing going to churches where people would sing praise, and the sound would rise to the rafters, and you could feel the energy in the room, and then to come into a sacrament meeting, and then watching people just go and so it was a big switch for me, and praying became kind of foreign to me because, and I get the way we pray, it's meant to show respect and whatnot, but I was like, is that the only way? If different cultures have different ways of showing respect, and they choose to express it that way, and then again, watching missionaries correcting and saying, no, don't pray like that, is that then wrong? I think that we don't give credit enough to other cultures and other methods and value what they value as sacred. I think we impose ourselves a lot on other people and other cultures when it comes to praying and their devotion to Christ, because a lot of the spiritual moments I've had have been outside of the hasn't been in the chapel, hasn't been in church. And in the civil rights seminar, one of my most spiritual moments was with the Gretz family, and there were a white preacher from where was I? Was I in Alabama? Yeah. I was like, what? Anyways, in Alabama, and they were not Mormon, but I felt the Spirit so strongly in their house, to walk in there and to see how much of their lives they have given to this movement, and to see them from a different faith. I think that there is I think it needs to be said that truth can be found elsewhere, and that and that's important, especially if we're going to be a global church, to realize that other cultures carry truth, and that, again, rather than coming and being condescending and being like, what can I learn from you? And I think that's the way Christ taught too. He taught at eye level. He always descended down and sat with his people. And so I think that's something that we forget to do.
I think I agree with, I know I agree with Deli and with what everyone else has said, but just sometimes when people will talk about the priesthood ban or things like that, and just not, feeling uncomfortable with the answers that they give, and then not feeling comfortable myself in challenging what they've said and being like, is there another take on this? I understand that this is what you've heard from some bishop 5 years ago, but is there another way that this can be viewed, and another way that we can understand this that's more inclusive and more holistic? And so, like Dr. Hedstrom said in my little intro, I'm part of a gospel choir, and just being able to sing songs that are just powerful, and everyone's up and clapping and having a good time, that's one of the most spiritual experiences that I've had, is just being able to actually get into the music, and we don't experience that when we're at church every Sunday. So that's, yeah.
Do you see yourself in church content? And if not, do you attempt to assert or insert yourself?
Nope. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you for this question. So quick story. I was watching Sister Aborto's, her parts 1 through 3 origin story series. Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. Okay, cool. If you haven't seen it, why not? So I was watching it, and it was interesting because it's talking about the country she's from and her story. And all of a sudden, I started seeing people from my ward in the Mormon Message, and I was like, hang on, Sister Aborto, she's not Polynesian. Did they just round up the Polynesian and put them and their brown faces in front of this camera? rude. Like, and so it was just interesting because like there's been a shift, you know, like I watched the Book of Mormon stories Bible videos when I was little, you know, when they have Nephi looking bright white, and it's like, okay. And so I've like watched all those growing up, and it was never like an issue for me when I was little, because I was just like, oh, this is just how it is. They're just, Jesus is white. And so as I got older and I like know people that are in these like church videos that are coming out with now, I'm seeing the transition and I'm grateful for it, but it's also a little bit painful, because I realize that the diversity at the headquarters for this organization is lacking a lot. And it's lacking so much that you just have to round up brown people, even though they are not from that country. And it's saying, to me, it's saying that, like, you know what, Los, you may be Polynesian, but to the rest of us, girl, you're just brown. And that is it. And you know what? Maybe that's all you're ever going to be. And so that is so painful to watch and to see that. And I served my mission in Washington State, and there was a family in my first ward and my first area, and they were like, they told me, because we were excited as missionaries, we were like, oh, there's these new Mormon messages coming out. And I'm excited because I was like, you know, because the people in the Americas actually look like the people in the Americas, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm excited to share these videos. And this one family was like, oh, we know the actor who plays Jesus. And that's really weird for us to watch it. So we actually don't show our kids those videos. And I was like, missionary me was like, what? You don't show these? You know, but I'm thinking about it, and it's like, because they know who he is as a person, it's hard for them to watch it. And because they know that he doesn't really look like Jesus. And so it's just like an interesting thing to have all this church content that I think is beautiful, but definitely I do not think it's reflective of how international our church is and how global it is. Like, I just don't think it's inclusive, and that does a disservice to the saints who are in the Pacific Islands, like my parents were, because they want to believe so dearly that they relate to the other saints in the world, but they cannot, because they cannot see themselves.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I went to the MOA, I think, was it last month? And there was not the MOA, the HVAC, and there was a painting in there, and it's like showing like the hosts of heaven, and there's a long procession of like just of angels, and I was looking for at least a brown or black angel, and I couldn't find any of them in the front nor in the midsection, and finally I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's racialized America. They're probably in the back. So I'm looking, and I'm like, oh, they're nowhere. I was like, what does it, so what do people think heaven is like? You know, where our brownness and our experiences are completely erased, and we're all just become wise. This is our exalted state. And when we talk about heaven, we have to contextualize what we're saying, because we say it's the most, we'll be in a perfected state or exalted state, and then you have paintings like that and it's all white. What are you implying? And so that's really frustrating, that there's still paintings that are like that. And, you know, they're still hung on campus, or there's not a note on the side that explains, you know, this is how heaven is, you know, we typically paint heaven, but I would invite us to think about our black and brown brothers and sisters who Heavenly Father took just as long to create. And, you know, among the midst of like beautiful things that he created, he took the time to create black and brown people. And so there is value in our colors. We don't look at like red flowers and we're like, why are you red? You know, on your perfected state, you won't be red. He created us for like this for a reason. So that's not going to go away. And so I think that that's something that's overlooked, and that's not talked about. And so, yeah.
Can I jump ahead? I don't think we're going to make all the questions. Okay, I'm going to ask 3 questions together. How are your interactions with white students on campus? Do you feel included and supported in your campus community? And how have you carved out a space for yourself at BYU?
So my interactions with white students on campus, they're fine if I deny my Hispanic heritage. And I think this is something that, like, I as a Hispanic, and I've noticed am easily able to do, is people just choose not to look at that part of me. And so then to them, I'm just another darker, white person. I don't have an accent. I'm not speaking Spanish, not listening to my music that's in Spanish, which is a bop. And so if I don't bring that stuff up, then it's okay. But if I do, they become uncomfortable. It's just an uncomfortable situation. Because I don't know, I feel like white students wonder why I talk about the things I do. When it's like, it's my reality, it's my life. Can I ask you not to talk about your life? Okay, no. And so do I feel supported? I feel supported now because I have chosen to find my community. I've chosen to find my support. I went to the women's studies class, my first day of class in the women's studies, right after I went to the office and I was like, make me a minor, ASAP. I went to different clubs looking for people who thought like me and looking for people who looked like me, where I could share my experiences and not just be stared and gawked at. So I definitely feel supported, not because the support was there, but because I went and made it and found it. And now by being the Women of Color Club is something that I hope to do for other women of color as well.
Okay. My experiences with white students on campus is mixed. Sometimes they're really good and normal, and people are just like, hey, how you doing? This is my name. Nice to meet you. Let's hang out. And I'm like, cool, great, let's do it. And other times they're interesting. Here's my story that happened on Friday, which is perfect material for the panel. So I was just hanging out with my friend on Friday. I was at her apartment, and she went to change because we were going to go out. And then I was just talking with one of her roommates that I had never met before. We were talking about hair because my hair was curly. And she's like, oh, I love your hair. And I was like, thank you. We were talking about perms, how she wanted her hair to be curly. I was like, you can get a perm. That'll be great. And then she stops and she's like, oh, have you met my brother? And I was like, no, I haven't met your brother. I just met you. And so I was like, okay, maybe like her brother wants a perm or something. I don't know. And then she's like, well, my brother loves black people, so you should meet him. So she immediately calls her brother, invites him over. Right? He comes over with 4 of his friends, and she just says, I just wanted you to come over and meet this girl because she's black and you served in Detroit. And I've never been to Detroit. So I'm probably not like the black people he knows. I grew up in a suburb, so that's different than Detroit as well. So I just didn't know what to do, and I was like, hi, nice to make a friend this way. And so that's not like a singular experience. That's happened multiple times to me, where people will just say strange things where you don't interact with humans that way normally. So those are my experiences.
I think it's been interesting for me because, again, it's been a mixed reactions. I've encountered like 3 groups of people. So there's white people who, they want you to, they like the fact that you're black, but, a sprinkle of it. So they want me to crack the jokes. They want me to, be funny and be the cool one. But when I talk about like, race or Black Lives Matter or stuff like that, they shut down. You see people they want to change the subject quickly. And I'm like, that's a part of my experience. If you want me, you get all of me. You don't get to pick and choose. And so that's been a frustrating thing to have to realize that people don't want all of me. And so I've had to make sure that I have friendships where people can see all of me. And there's the group of people who, they approach you and they just, it's been really weird, where it's just about, oh, you're different. Like, what do you, so like, I don't even remember how to explain this, but so one of my friends was telling me about how his roommate had like bit his tongue, and his roommate's friend goes, oh, what if you bit your tongue off? And he's just like, haha, that'd be funny. I need a tongue transplant or something. And then the guy goes, what if you got a black person's tongue? Like, I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize that we were like physically different. So the people walking around and with these preconceived notions, and the only way they approach you is to ask you weird questions. And it's a really awkward and inorganic experience that is full of like bias, and you just feel like you're a museum like thing on display. And again, like Deli said, like you're being gawked at. And then there's people who, again, who are just like really interested in you as a person and who want to get to know you. And that's like my favorite relationship. And so that's just been interesting, you know. The one that strikes me the most is the people that don't want to hear that you know, love diversity but not too much. So that's the group I think creates a lot of like tension for me, because I try to avoid the group that like is like, hey, what are you? Where are you from? You know, I try to avoid that group.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with interactions with white students is always the like, what are you question. So hear me now, all my white friends in here, don't you freaking dare ask any person of color, what are you?
A human.
Right. Because it's kind of funny, and you know, we're having a good time in here. And I mean, chances are if you came to this, you like know one of us and wanted to support us because we were nervous. But here's the thing. When you ask another human being, what are you? It's not okay. It's just not. I don't care what your intentions are. I don't care if you served your mission where one of us are from. I don't care if your family adopted someone who looks like one of us. I don't care, because when you ask me, a human being, a child of God, if we want to go the LDS route, what am I think of all the things that I'm not compared to you. That's what I think of. Okay? So whenever I get that question, what are you? Because I get it a lot in 2018, but I hear it for what it is, and I always look at them. I'm saying, well, what are you? And they look at me like, what was that? Hello. I'm like, wow, see how weird you feel? That's how weird I feel times a million. Because if you wanted to know where I'm from, you ask, where are you from? Don't ask it a second time when I tell you Texas, okay? Because when you ask me where I'm from, I'm assuming you mean geographical location. And yes, I grew up in Texas, Austin, in fact. So if you want to know where my parents are from, because you're just trying to place my brownness somewhere in your mind with the map that you know, you need to ask, what is your ethnic origin? I'm curious. And I will tell you that I am Tongan and I am Palauan, and I will thank you for asking me the right way. Okay, so that's how interactions usually go for me on campus. Luckily, there's this weird thing about being Polynesian is somehow people think that they're automatically your friend, which is okay. I'm okay with that, okay? My personality, we're okay with that. But then there's like this expectation that I'm really funny, but I'm not really smart. Yeah, I hear some sounds because, yeah, you know, okay? Because I'm the one that's really hilarious and can have the jokes. And you can kind of get on the edge with the racial jokes with like the funny Polynesian, and they'll be pretty dismissive, like, oh yeah, okay, thank you, brother. You know, and so it's a lot of things like that. But then when I try and talk to you about something serious that's going on, like the shootings that have happened in the past week, the anti-Semitism, the 2 black people getting shot in Kentucky was while they were going shopping for groceries. When I try and talk to you about that, and you're just like, oh, okay, whoa, I think I have class. Sorry, Losa, you know, maybe you know what? Well, hey, I'll see you sometime. That's not okay, because I gave you the time and the space that you've taken already, and so you need to give me time and space, because that is what the Savior would have done for me. And if you claim to be his disciple, okay, friend, that's a 24-hour, 24/7 job. So let's all just do a little better, be a little better, you know what I'm saying? So that's how my experiences are, Dr. Hegstrom.
Okay, so it is time for class to end. So we're just take a second to let people get up. Is that okay? And leave if you need to leave. And then if you want to stay, do you want to answer a couple more questions? Do you want to let people ask questions? Okay, great. So let's let people filter out. And then anyone who wants to stay to ask questions, please do. Just go ahead and line up. Thank you. Okay, so if you do want to ask questions, please go to the microphone.
You can start.
Hey, I'm Caleb Bruce. I just have a question. So I grew up in Colorado, and obviously I'm here right now. And they're both just extremely white places. And so obviously, like, I have this desire to not be a racist person, and I like have these stereotypes. I feel like most of us here do, like, we wouldn't be here. But for me, like, I have such little exposure. You know, I've interacted very little with people of color. So I see in myself, like, you know, when I'm walking in campus and I see a person of color, there's a little bit of a natural reaction, just like, oh, that's different. I haven't been around that much. So what advice would you have to, like, avoid that kind of, you know, avoid believing stereotypes and kind of acting differently around people of color when I've had such little exposure in my life?
Well, I think the fact that you're acknowledging that is important and is a good first step. But I would also say that, you know, why? Because I get not seeing somebody that looks different than you. Like, for example, okay, before coming here, I've never heard of, like, Polynesia. Like, I knew Hawaii, but I didn't know, and, like, so I just didn't know. I don't know, this is, like, probably, like, ignorance on my part. And so when I would see Polynesians, I was just like, oh, are they, like, mixed, like, kind of the same reaction? I was like, what is this group of people? But I didn't find myself, like, gawking and staring at them, like, or looking at them any differently. And I think I chose to let those relationships develop organically. I approached people not because they were brown and I had never had a brown friend before and I wanted to meet a brown person. I approached them because I was like, oh, that's Losa. I want to know Losa and, like, find out what she's about and just let that friendship develop organically. And so I don't think it's ever good to force yourself to go out and be like, I want to meet a black person, a brown person. Like, that's not the way to go about it. But I think there's a problem in our society, like, right now. We approach people with this, like, with these boxes, and we're looking to check them, and that's not organic. And again, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I make friends with a bunch of different groups of people, but I never set out by saying, like, I want to, I don't know, those just develop organically. And maybe look at your spaces and look at the conversations that you're having. Are they welcoming, or is your friend groups, like, is it alienating? Is it something that, you know, that you just would never find black or brown people in? I don't know how to explain it because it's about forming, like, friendships. I don't.
Yeah, I basically have, like, that same thing to say is, like, looking where you're at. Obviously, like, here you can see, like, around the room, and there's some different types of people around here. So putting yourself, I think, in those situations, just becoming more educated, then you will naturally start to form those types of relationships and become more exposed to different ideas and different people because you're putting yourself in that space. But it takes, it's work on your part to be able to do it. You can't just walk around BYU and be like, well, I hope I find someone who doesn't think like everyone else, because you're not going to. Because, like Déborah was saying, like me personally, I look at people or groups and, like, would I be welcome there? Would I be safe there? Yeah. No? Okay, then I'm going to go find people that I can be safe with. And so you need to go find and make yourself that type of person, like she was saying, to make yourself a safe person.
Yeah. Next.
Thanks for the answers, and also you should take sociology of race and ethnicity.
Girl, yes. Hey, we're in 307 together. Hold on, I'm gonna get there. Hold on. What? You're welcome. What was your name, Caleb? Yeah. You're welcome, Caleb.
I just had a question, and I forgot your name. Is it Kristalynn?
Kristalynn.
Thank
Yes.
you. Earlier, when you were introducing yourself or talking at the beginning, you said something about how it's changed at BYU since you first got here, and I was just interested to hear more about that, like how you've seen it change.
Thank you. I think it's just felt a little bit more alienating because, like I said before, like, the high school I went to, there were multiple people of color, and so I had those people as friends, but also, like, I had my family that I was with all the time, and so I was able to, like, lean on those people that were immediately close to me that I knew were, like she was saying, like, safe people. or like I can have these tough conversations about things that are happening socially and politically and all these like things that are just happening in my life. But like it takes a while to like get to know a person, obviously. And so like knowing who I can actually talk to, I can talk to all these ladies, they're great, but like knowing who I could talk to and like where I could go to find people that I could talk to about things that were happening in my life was kind of hard. So when I first got here, I was like, it's not gonna be that much different from the high school I went to. But then like after being here for a while, I was like, it's kind of different.
Yeah, go ahead. Come next.
So I'm wondering if this is an experience that you can relate to a little bit. As a queer person on campus, something that I experience a lot is I'll be in like a class or in a group of people where someone says something and you're like, that's really awesome that you said that, and yay, good for you. And everyone in the room was like nodding their heads and like, yes, that's so good, like that's what we all need to do. But then no real like change happens with those people, and it's that kind of surface level of like, objectively they're like, yeah, that's a good thing that we should all do, but then like no change happens. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are and what needs to happen to kind of make the student body and the campus culture be more accommodating to women of color and to other minority groups.
What is your name, my friend?
Everett?
Hey, Everett. Nice to meet you. Thank you for your question. So I think visibility is such an important thing. And like a million thank yous to Renata for even inviting us to be part of this lecture series, because I think the more that people see that these like marginalized populations are, human, the more that they'll be comfortable approaching us. Do you know what I mean? And it becomes more of just like a, yeah, I get it, to like, yeah, I get it, and I'm going to do something about it. And so I think, at least for me, I definitely try to make myself as visible as possible on campus. Not sure I can make myself more visible, being part of the minority here, but I try to speak up in classes and to help people see that it's a pretty small leap from here to here. Do you know what I'm saying? It's pretty small, because you don't have to like go and like, oh, let's just go serve all the people of this marginalized population. Like, no, dude, just talk to one of us for like 5 minutes. And it might not mean much for you, but it means a lot for us. So I think visibility is super, super important, and just inviting that dialogue. But for marginalized populations, careful with how much you invite, because at least for me, it's called racial battle fatigue. So my therapist calls it. And and that's something very real, that you just kind of feel beat down, and you're trying to be open, you're trying to be visible, but just taking time off from that and realizing that you don't have to be the person that everyone goes to, but you can be a person that some people go to.
I would say that I think that people, and I know we've said this a lot, I think that people forget like we're humans. This should be a humanity issue. Like you shouldn't be like, oh, I want to help the brown people. You should be like, as a human being, I'm appalled that this is happening, that people feel this way. And so I think that people haven't made that connection, that no, seeing the Confederate flag should offend you just as much. Not because, oh, my brown friends will get hurt when they see this. No, you know what it stands for. And it stands for hate and a plundering of people, and it's a symbol of terror, and as a human you should react to that yourself. And so I think that a lot of people haven't made that connection of like, oh, this isn't about the brown people, this is about the human race, because right now it's them, one day it could be me. And so I, as a human, I should, and as a brother and sister to each other, like, this hurts me too. This is not okay. I should not stand for this. I think a lot of people don't make that connection themselves, that this is a burden that's also on them too.
Yeah, so real quick, talking about the study I did. So this past spring, we did interviews with women of color on campus, asking them about their experiences. And one of the last questions we asked them is, what can the administration, what can people do, what can they change to help you? And a lot of them, what they started out with saying is just like, I just wish they were open to it. Because it's not even about understanding, it's that they're not even open to the idea of understanding. And so they immediately close themselves off. And I think that's, like, we can nod in classes, but a lot of people just nod, and it doesn't mean anything. And so we really need to be open to the idea, like, when people are saying these things, if you feel yourself becoming defensive, stop that and ask yourself why. because these are real situations and real things that these people are experiencing. I just think we need to look within ourselves to be able to see what we can do and be open to it.
Can we keep going, Renata?
Well, maybe one more question.
Okay.
We're going to be quick just because we got to get them to lunch and then to class.
Okay, one more question.
Questions for
Great. So, my question is like, how do you deal with the missionaries who are, they come back and they're like, oh, we help these sweet like savages in the motherland. Like, how do you guys deal with them? Because I have my way. So my way is the nice way. So like, is there a good way to like clap at them?
So that's funny. I've actually gotten that a lot with with this new semester. I just these
20-year-olds come back.
these guys in my ward, they come up to me and within 5 seconds I say my name. They're like, "Hola, hermana, ¿cómo estás?" And I'm like, "Did I say I speak Spanish? No? Okay, then why are you suddenly talking?" It's like, "Yes, I do, but you didn't ask because you're just assuming by the way I look." So I think, I don't know, that's a really tough question that I'm still trying to figure out what to do with these people because they think they mean well. That's the thing, they think they mean well. And I don't know, it's about having discussion. And I've had it with my friends, but just letting them know that, hey, I know you mean well, but like you need to talk to me first or actually get to know me first, you know? I don't know. Do you have anything?
I try to always assume positive intentions. It's kind of hard sometimes. In fact, it's super hard. But with missionaries who come back, specifically ones that come back from Tonga, I just know that there's like I can't even really describe it, but there's just like a different kind of connection for them to me that I understand they learned in Tonga. And so I'm a lot gentler with them. But I definitely school them. Like, okay, look, what's your name? Evan, Chad, what is it? Do not, I just tell them like, do not assume, okay? Because it's hurtful that I've never been to Tonga and you have, and people think, they'll be like, oh, he's more Tongan than you, Los, because he's been there. And I'm like, don't you freaking ever say that to me ever again, because it's mean. Okay, so whenever I deal with missionaries, I'm gentle initially, but if they serve in Tonga, they know that I'll be nice and then I'll not be nice quickly to help them learn. And so I think it's just very specific situations.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks very much.
Good job, everyone. You're welcome. I had a good time. We should have this every